Damn, finally, shit. Yeah, anyway, yeah, my phone cut off on the last part because I ran out of minutes. And then my shit's like 1%, so I had to go plug it up again. And anyway, so yeah, as far as Hayya, even though it's really Hayye, he was in Al-Hira before he made it into Najran. And Al-Hira at the time, you know, you had Christians that was being persecuted, but the important fact is that those Christians were mostly Nestorian Christians. So as far as the historical account of Hayya or Hayye, you know, he's also credited with bringing Christianity into Najran. But just like the blog that I did about it originally, I was saying he more than likely did, but he brought a form of Christianity. He wasn't the first person to bring Christianity, period. That credit goes to Ezana, who was the first person to bring Christianity into Arabia. All right. So, and that's validated as far as Hayya. I feel like that's validated by the chapter regarding Najran. So I did my research about it last year when I did the blog on it. You know, they were saying that during this period, that period when Muhammad had that dialogue with those two monks from Najran, when he was giving them his stipulation, but also suggestions. You know, when I read about Najran during that period, they also had Nestorian Christians there too. So as far as what occurred, 200 years before this whole dialogue that Muhammad, or almost 200 years before this whole dialogue that Muhammad had with them, you know, I feel like, you know, as far as like the introduction of Nestorianism into the people of Najran, based on what's written and what's available, I give that credit to Hayya or Hayye. So that's something extra. But like I say, as far as the Islamic view of Jesus, that's what they believe. So I feel like those surahs that I got, because like I say, it's other surahs, but they basically just restate the same thing over and over again. But book 3 from 33 up until 70, and also book 19 from, or was it 21? I think, no, book 21 from 14 up until 28 I read. So I got a good little understanding as far as where they're coming from. But, you know, I'm an open-minded individual, so I leave room in my head, you know, as I continue with just studies, period, to the fact that I feel like I'm going to come across something that's going to help me understand why in the heck something ain't really adding up mathematically, as far as like Muhammad believing that God is also a single person. You know, which is a big contradiction to the whole Allah deity. You know, I understand the other two deities being given attributes and stuff like that, but as far as Allah, I feel like, you know, when I read the whole thing about Jahiliyyah, I'm like, okay, that gives me a little I don't want to jump the gate and say give me a little bit more in-depth understanding, but it was definitely deeper than the surface, I felt like, because I'm like, okay, these people, excuse me, I'm like, if these people believe in Allah and all these other deities, and it changed depending on where they lived at, because I know like in Taif, for instance, you know, there's a little modification there as far as, you know, this Jahiliyyah religion, because Taif was also considered a district of Mecca at the time. In fact, Muhammad's uncle had owned some property there too, as far as Al-Abbas al-Muttalib. But I'm like, I almost lost my train of thought. Anyway, yeah, as far as like Allah, I'm like, okay, so that's sort of sophisticated right there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, these people, as far as from a metaphysical standpoint, do have some type of philosophical understanding. Like they're not literally just fucking worshiping the water or the trees. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm getting at. This whole thing about Allah gave me a hint as far as their psyche when it comes to understanding shit concerning metaphysics. At least those who are the most educated. You see what I'm saying? So if Muhammad was one of those individuals and he grew up under that, but he was also well familiar with religious or Christian notions and Abrahamic notions and stuff like that, I'm like, I don't see how he could actually believe that God was just a, you know what I'm saying? And that ain't me just being arrogant, like I'm trying to fit it into my understanding. I'm talking about as far as like the bracket, the whole package of information concerning their understanding of Jesus, but also the historical shit that occurred around that. When I consider all of that, it's just something within that picture that ain't adding up. It's like it's something missing out. It's like one of the puzzle pieces is fucking wrong somehow. That's why I don't really trust everything that's said in the Quran. You know, that's why I figure like, okay, when I looked up as far as like when it was first actually put out, but it only took me to the 16th century. It's a lot of fucking doubt in my head. But anyway, I got all the other stuff out the way. It was maybe a couple of other things that I wanted to say, but I got a little distracted. But yeah, this is the official shit. I still plan on doing the Bill O'Reilly thing or his book, but that is so fucking far in the future. I don't even know. Anything can happen to where I suddenly get inclined to do that blog. But right now, based on my feeling, I feel like that may be in the far future. That might not be something that I do now. But yeah, I got that part out of the way as far as like understanding Jesus. But the devil thing is fucking exotic. I never heard that. I'm like, and again, like those two blogs that I did, it brought me back to my question as far as these verses within this surah. I'm like, is there something missing? You know what I'm saying? You talking about Mary and her being blessed with giving birth to Jesus as God foreseen, and all of her descendants that will come from Satan. I'm like, man, I wish it was somebody right next to me or something that I could call and be like, look, explain that part to me, because I still look it up just to make sure and get my own understanding. But just kind of like a shortcut, like, explain what the fuck they was talking about. Why did they refer to Mary's descendants coming from Satan? That's like saying whoever she's, I don't know if making is the correct word, but you know, whoever facilitates her seed, it's almost like you saying that takes the whole man. That it's like you saying she fucking the devil. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a whole nother book. You know, it's almost like a sci-fi. Like if you accept this story as being true, that portion, them referring to the person that fathers her kids as being a devil, is almost kind of like a sci-fi add-on. That's how exotic it is to me. And I feel like that part needs to be zoomed on a little bit more. So I definitely will do that. But as far as like the whole essence, as far as the Islamic view of Jesus, I got that down packed. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Going back to the angel thing. That's what it was. It's a major point. Major part that I almost forgot. The angel thing. As far as her descendants coming from the devil, I'm like, that would contradict this angel that God created and sent to her for her to have Jesus. All right, I didn't crisscross it, so I didn't go read like a Christian version or a Hebrew version. I read this all within these surahs. You see what I'm saying? And I got the websites and all that documented. So I'm like, how they gonna explain that? On one hand, you saying that God created a male for Mary who had a special purpose for her to have sex with so she could give birth to Jesus. But at the same time as you're speaking, when you go beyond, like before her birth, or before she becomes an adult at least, you speaking to her mother and you're saying that Mary's descendants after her, which will be by Satan, will also be blessed. So at the same time, it's like, okay, geometrically speaking, are you fucking saying that this guy that God created for her is also the devil? You see what I'm saying? Make that connection. It's like you're saying, if all of this is consistent, if all of these different dialogues and all this stuff is consistent, it's like you're saying that this guy that God fashioned is also the devil, if Mary is going to be impregnated by him, but at the same time being impregnated by Satan himself. So, going back to my purpose for looking up the Quran and trying to figure out, like, when is that? Because the Quran was put together much fucking earlier than the 16th century. But again, from a historical record, an official printing of the Quran happened in the 16th century. So even if I disclude that and I say, okay, after the 16th century, the fact of the matter is the Quran wasn't put together during Muhammad's lifetime. There are writings, but it wasn't put together then. So are you telling me that there's no embellishment whatsoever? Because people say that the Quran is the only religious book that cannot be misinterpreted because of the Arabian language. But okay, considering that, that's cool. But what about the actual content? What about the actual stories within this language? How can you say that God created a male for her, but then turn around and say at the same time, even before that, that she's going to be pregnated by Satan himself, but these descendants that come after her are going to be blessed at the same time? How the hell are you going to remedy that? You know what I'm saying? How you going to make sense of something that seems to be so sci-fi-ish if you do indeed believe in the tales of the Quran and the Bible? But in this case, the Quran. That's my question. So, yeah, that's it. You know what I'm saying? We'll go ahead and put these joints on YouTube. As y'all can see, it's 7:14 a.m. So it's early as hell. This is strictly for documentation purposes, retention as well, because I'm interested in it. It's not to do nobody's homework. You know what I'm saying? If people see my stuff on YouTube, it's for various reasons. But the whole point is for me to just to develop my shit and my understanding, because I find this stuff interesting. But yeah, y'all have a good night, or a good morning, or a good day.